Or folk can hear you through my microphone if you're loud.
Yeah, I wouldn't say anything.
Okay, we're live. So welcome, folks, to this webinar all about how to be a tireless podcaster. And I realize that we're just starting a touch early. Get on 5 minutes before we kick off. Plan to kick off at 5 o'clock. Just starting just now so that we can welcome everyone in, see where everybody is, where you're from, who you are. So let's see as folks start to come in. So we're starting to see folk coming in already, which is excellent. Hey, Joseph, Sigrid, Dustin, Patricia, Sean, Shane, Jill, AW, Christine and Matthew. Great stuff. Welcome all to the webinar. It'd be great to see a little bit of information about yourselves before we start kicking off. We're going to kick off at 5 o'clock my time, which is midday Eastern, and 9 o'clock Pacific. But yeah, it'd be great to hear where you're from, where everybody's dialing in. So get in the chat and post your location, post where you're coming in from. Love to hear. Shane's writing hey in the chat. Excellent stuff. Patricia says, I have a very plummy voice, which is true. Well, Scottish. So a little bit different from our American listeners, viewers, but hopefully it's not too distracting for you. Kansas City is Shane, and Patricia's from Boston. David Purnell from Zeeland, Michigan. So that's great. Mostly American so far, which is normal. Most of our audience on the podcast host is American, so I would expect that. Great to have some excellent people from our neighbours across the pond. And AW says it's from Oxford. Excellent. So we've got at least one person in the UK here joining us. Always nice to have some local participants, but yeah, we don't often get that many. So good to see you there. So we're enjoying our a little bit of background music at the moment. Tell me if it's a bit too loud, I can turn it down. It's actually one of our tunes that we use for UK Business Startup, one of the background tunes for that one. So yeah, one of our favourites. Good one for a bit of atmosphere. So I thought I'd give some entertainment on the way in. So again, if you're just joining in, that's 2 minutes to the start of the webinar. We're going to kick everything off at 5 o'clock my time, which is the UK, 12 o'clock Eastern, and 9 o'clock Pacific. So we're nearly there. But yeah, if you're just joining in, we've gone up to a fair few attendees now. We've got, that's great stuff. Yeah, if you've just joined in, if you haven't already put in the chat, let me know where you're here from, where you are, where you've joined us from, I should say. Oh, Patricia's here. It says, can't hear the music. Let me have a quick listen. Oh, it might have turned off. My entertainment's failing me. Hold on a second. Let's see if we can get that back on. There we go. Paused for some reason. Can you hear it now, Patricia? Oh, Joseph from Southampton. Excellent. Another UK participant as well. That's good to see. And Columbus, Ohio, which is Leyland. Patricia can hear it now. Excellent. Good stuff. Got a bit of entertainment there. So for everyone that's in the chat room, we've got Matthew joining us. So Matthew is my able, most attractive assistant in the background, bearded assistant. He's over there. He'll be in the chat room helping you all out along the way. We'll cover out how it's all going to work once we start kicking off. I'm going to give it a couple minutes more just to make sure everyone that is in, everyone that wants to come in is in. I can still see some people coming in out of our registered users. So I'm going to give it a couple more minutes. So yeah, a couple more just popped in now though. If you're just joining us, Carol, excellent. Let us know where you're from. I'd love to see where everyone's joining us from around the world. Joining us on Tireless Podcaster webinar. I'm really excited about this because it's the first time we've run this one. So it's content that it's the kind of concepts that we put out all the time, concepts that I talk about all the time. But never put it together into a webinar before, so really good to see. will be really good to see how you guys find it. I'm sure you're going to get a lot from it. So Chris from Essex here as well, brilliant. And Carol's in from South Carolina. I went to South Carolina once, lived there for a summer. We worked in a theme park summer of my youth. It was good fun. Lovely place. Okay, so we should start things off here. It's 5:05. So if people join in now, and they're coming in late anyway, so they deserve to miss a couple of minutes. Matthew, and you in the chat there as well. Everything coming through all right for you? You're going to join in with the participants? Oh, there he is. He's already written something. So yes, that's a nice. Christine says we need to chat on iPhone. I can't hear you still. Can you hear me normally, Christine? Roger, don't worry. I'm putting the music off. Tone that down now. Okay, so music off. Let's get serious. Let's start off the webinar. Let me just get everything back in place and we'll kick it off. Okay, folks, thank you very much for joining us on the Tireless Podcaster. Like I said, I'm excited to be running this. This is the first time we're running this particular webinar, so I'm really excited to put it out there. Like I said, it's stuff that we talk about all the time. It's concepts we talk about all the time, but I really wanted to put together one webinar which covered one big aim that we always have when we're working with new podcasters. And that aim is to help you become tireless. That's the concept behind this webinar, is to become tireless. In that means a tireless podcaster is somebody that can just get their podcast out every single week. That podcast continues, it's sustainable. You can keep up podcasting for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. You can be an unfailing podcaster, unrelenting podcaster, inexhaustible, all of those different things that really make you able to succeed, to outlast your competition, to improve your skills, to practice, to put it out there and really give your audience value week in, week out, and keep the quality up as well. So it's being consistent, it's being quality, and it's enjoying it. The only way you can be a tireless podcaster is really to enjoy it, because you're never going to keep it up over the long term otherwise if you don't enjoy it. So that's the whole aim behind this webinar. What I want to do is cover 3 big concepts that I think make for a tireless podcaster. I'll go into what those concepts are just in a minute, but those 3 concepts, by the end of this webinar, those 3 concepts are going to help you make your podcast sustainable, make sure it takes as little time as possible, you're as efficient as possible in getting your podcast out there, so that you, like I said, you can do it week in, week out, put out that content, reach your audience and give them as much value as you possibly can every single week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over to the slides now, and you can start to follow through here. So the 3 concepts I'm going to go through, it's 3 key ingredients to being a tireless podcaster. The 3 big things for me. By all means, there's other things as well in there that help us be consistent. I'll cover a few as we go along, but these are the 3 big things that I want to cover on this webinar. First of which is the right equipment. So the right equipment is key. The right equipment is so important because the right equipment helps you keep your quality up, but your efficiency up as well. It keeps your quality up, but your time down, your effort down. So we're going to cover a few equipment setups that make it high quality, but really easy to use. And I'll cover a couple of different contexts and how you use that equipment, a couple of different setups that will really help you to make sure that your equipment's giving you all you can, but really doesn't distract from the podcast itself. Because that's the problem. A lot of people can get really distracted by the equipment and make it really complex. You worry about, what your equipment is, what it's doing for you. And that really gets in the way of creating a great podcast and getting out every single week. So we're going to look into that. Next, it's about recording technique. So it's about how you go through and record your podcast. A few tricks and tips and techniques that you can do while you're recording that really help you to make it as efficient as possible, as easy as possible, all of which makes it fun, which makes it tireless, because it just means that you can do it week in, week out without any trouble. And then finally, we're going to go into post-production. So a big part of this is cutting post-production down as much as possible. It's about keeping it post-production. So that's editing, that's processing, keeping that as efficient and as sort of as low time as you possibly can, so that you're not spending hours every single week. You're making it as easy as possible, and that is one of the big things that can let you get your podcast out on a tireless schedule. So it's about the post-production as well. And by the end of the webinar, you'll know the process that I recommend to new podcasters, and the process I recommend to just established podcasters, that really helps you keep your quality up, but your efficiency really good as well. So it keeps the time and the effort down. So those are the 3 key ingredients. And we're going to go through all of those by the end of the webinar. Now, like I said, just a little bit of housekeeping. I've got Matthew here in the chat room as well. Matthew's trusty sidekick here. He'll be answering questions as we go along, but we're going to keep the big questions to the end. The way I want to work it is we're going to go through most of the content, the big content, in about half an hour, maybe a touch more, and then we're going to go into Q&A at the very end. So Matthew's going to be collating the questions as we go, and we'll do a massive Q&A at the end. I'll try and spend as much time as we can going through all of your questions and answer everything that we can at the end. So that'll be half an hour or so. Along the way, I'm going to be, we've got a fair bit of time here. I'm going to cover tons of stuff, lots of how-to, lots of information, try and give you as much value as possible. But obviously, limited time, so I'm going to direct you to loads of other resources too. A lot of them will be free. A lot of them will be stuff on our website. So we've written so much content around podcasting. I'm going to direct you to, further reading, further how-tos and that kind of stuff on the website. And some of it will be from our course catalog as well. So you probably know that we sell courses around podcasting as well. So I will talk about them a bit as well, just to let you know. But by all means, no pressure or no requirement to buy any of that. I just want to give away as much as we can just now. But by all means, if you want more how-to, more information, then we have a set of courses that we sell as well that can give you that kind of extra level. So that's the idea. If there's anything massive though, by all means, Matthew will let me know. Anything big, he'll give me a shout and we'll do that at the time. But otherwise, general questions we'll keep till the end. But let's get into it. So let's start with the equipment. Equipment is the first key part to tireless podcasting for me. So we're going to go through a few tireless equipment setups. There's a few key parts to that. I've mentioned it a little bit already. First of all is simplicity. Like I said, there's a lot of people get tied into the idea that they need really extensive equipment. They need equipment that, it's really shiny. You've got all the mixers and recorders and condenser mics and everything there. And you can get tied into or tempted into really upgrading your kit way beyond what you need. In the early days, we talk about simplicity more than anything else, because the last thing you want is a complex setup that takes ages to set up and causes a lot more possible problems. There's a lot more things can go wrong in a complex equipment setup. So simplicity is key in a tireless podcasting setup, because you want it to be simple, easy to get started up so that you can just record with a moment's notice every single time. You want value as well. So you want to be able to make sure that you're getting good quality out of what you put into this equipment. And talking of quality, we don't want to make it so simple that it's cutting down on your quality and it really degrades your show. So we're looking for top quality, but as simple as possible with that. So there's a balance here. There's a balance between quality, simplicity, and value. And the setups I'm going to take you through just now are really important here. So start off with Solo or Skype. So these are the setups for people who think that they're going to be recording just by themselves, the way I do Podcraft, for example. So a lot of the Podcraft episodes I record, it's just me sitting in this exact studio with this microphone in front of me, recording something just by myself. So there's setups that are particularly suited towards that. But those setups tend to lend themselves towards Skype as well, because when you're doing solo, you're recording into your computer possibly. With Skype as well, you're just recording into your computer. And the only microphone you really need, the only recording equipment you need is to record into that one source, because your co-host or your interviewee is on Skype. So these both suit the solo or the Skype setups. What we're looking for here is foolproof and quality. So again, it's the balance between being foolproof, easy to set up, no possible problems, but keeping high quality. And this is what I tend to recommend. And you'll have heard this before, I have no doubt, but I just want to confirm that this is really, it's a great setup. So you've got the ATR 2100. So USB mic, that's the key part here. USB straight into your computer, but good quality as well. So you've got that balance of ease and quality. A lot of people think that USB maybe not the best option because, you know, it's not bringing in mixers, not bringing in recorders, but you can get some great quality USB mics out there. And this is probably the best value one out there. Now, you can upgrade. You can get to higher quality mics, and I'll maybe mention them in a second, but this is a great starter. If you're in the UK, you can't get hold of the ATR 2100 very easily, so you may be going for the Samson Q2U, which is the equivalent in the UK. Now, if you want to upgrade, so you want a top quality USB mic, there's a few that we talk about. In our best microphones review, we talk about the Blue Yeti, great quality one. Lots of people use the Blue Yeti. Talk about the Rode the Rode Podcaster, brilliant quality USB mic, but a bit pricey, £120 or so. This is one we've tested recently, the Shure MV5, which is a really good quality USB mic. It's a step above the ATR 2100 or the Samson Q2U, but it's not that much more. It's up to about about £70, I think, last time I checked. So this is a great option if you want a higher quality USB. You think you're going to stay with USB long term. Now, the ATR 2100 has the advantage that it can take XLR, so it's flexible. It means that it can tie into, you know, digital recorders, mixers in future, if you did want to increase your complexity for a bit extra quality in future. The next one, if you're co-hosting or you want to go mobile. Now, the thinking here is that co-hosting suddenly means that you need more than one microphone in one place. So it's not just this mic. I want somebody on the other side of the desk with a mic as well. Or if you want to go mobile, maybe you want to be out and about. You want to take a recorder with you, or you want to have something with you that you can record, and you want to maybe easily get two people recording on location as well. So here, again, we're looking for future-proof. We're looking for foolproof, but we're also looking for a bit more flexibility in this setup. So this is going to cost a bit more, but it's going to be a bit more flexible. Now, what I always recommend here is the Zoom H4n. Now, the H4n is actually, it's an older setup now. So you've got the H5 has come out from Zoom. This is a digital recorder. It's basically a recorder that you can just have in hand. You can take out with you. You can chuck in your bag, in your pocket, but you can take it out with you as well. And it can record on its own. So you can see the microphones on the top of that, and they can actually record pretty decent quality just out and about, just holding it up to your mouth. But the advantage of this is that it's future-proof too. So you could add a couple of ATR 2100s or a couple of Samson Q2Us, and they plug directly into the H4n with the XLR cables on the bottom. And then suddenly you can have two people together with a microphone each, talking to each other with really good quality. That's professional quality audio you can have in one recorder. Now, you can upgrade, so you can get the Zoom H5, arguably better preamps, but costs a bit more. So the H4n is probably the best value, I think, recorder, because it lets you go out, it lets you plug in really good quality pro microphones like this, and that's possible. So that's a good setup for a mix of value and quality. The lower budget alternative is a Zoom H1. So this is the bottom level of the Zoom range. And you can plug in a lav mic. So you can see the lav mic in the slide there, which is, let me just draw on there. So the lav mic on the right, oh, a massive pen there. Let's cut them. So you've got the lav mic on the right there, which is the little microphone here. And that is basically a little microphone. It's a tie clip mic sometimes called, and that clips onto your shirt. So with the Zoom H1, you can record it just in your hand. Like I said, you could have a recorder here and you could just put it back and forth, or you can plug in the lav mic for a bit extra quality. And you can use a splitter as well to plug two lav mics in so you can do an interview. But arguably a little bit less powerful, a little bit less flexible because you can't plug in the pro quality mics, but still a great setup and a lot cheaper. So the Zoom H1 is only about £60–70. So that is two great quality mic setups. And if you had the first setup, so a good quality USB mic, say you went for an ATR 2100 as a USB mic to start with, that will get you through your first 50, 100 episodes if you want it to. And then add in a digital recorder like the H1 or the H4n, and then suddenly you can do just about any kind of podcasting you would like to. The other advantage of the H4n, just to tag that on, is that it can act as a USB mic as well. So you can plug that H4n into your computer and actually record directly into that H4n, and that can act as a USB microphone. So that can actually replace the 2100 or the Shure mic as well. So that's an option too. So for equipment junkies, though, I know that as much as I'll preach simplicity, value, keeping things simple, there's always people who want to buy more shiny kit, me included. For example, this isn't part of the simple setup, and I've got a mixer sitting here and everything as well. So it's justifiable, though. Once you start to make money out of your podcast, once it starts to sustain itself, it's much more justifiable to spend that money on it. So by all means, go to our articles here, podhost.me/kit, and that'll take you through our entire range of podcast equipment articles and show you all of our advice about best microphones, best mixers, best digital recorders, all of that sort of stuff. So you can go through there and have a look through our entire range. It's probably the most common thing that we write about at the Podcast Host. It's kind of the stuff that Matthew and I love writing about because we love messing about with equipment as well. We're certainly equipment junkies ourselves. So pop over there and you can see our full range of equipment. So moving on to the next section, the second of the three key parts of a tireless podcaster is the actual craft of recording. So it's your recording craft. It's thinking about how you're going to put together your show, how you're going to go through that process of actually recording something, putting it down on tape, with thought around the live recording, thought about how you're putting together the recording itself, and thought towards post-production. So recording and post-production are so closely tied when you want to make it really efficient, really time sensitive, really cutting down the time and effort. So there's a lot of mindset in here. And this is the framework that I follow. I want to go through this. So like I said, we've got mindset and process. Mindset is around how you think about recording. It's around, a lot of people think that the recording craft is basically just getting the content out there and then thinking about production afterwards, thinking about the process afterwards. But really, I think there's a lot to be gained, a whole lot to be gained by having a different type of mindset to recording. And I'm going to go over that, show you how to think about recording that's really going to make it so much easier, really improve your content a whole lot as well over time. But then you do have a process too. So you do have to think about the process you use to record your podcast that makes it easier for post-production when you do have to do some editing. So first, we've got the mindset, the self-improvement mindset. Now, a big part of this for me is not using editing as a crutch. And by that, I mean, this is something that a lot of new podcasters do. A lot of new podcasters get into it and they start recording shows and they make all sorts of mistakes, as we all do. I still make tons of mistakes when I'm recording a podcast. New podcasters even more so. But they think that the idea of podcasting is that you put it down and then you edit the show afterwards to turn a mistake-filled show into a good show. And that is the wrong way to think about it from my point of view. I think you need to go into podcasting with a massive self-improvement mindset. And by that, I mean, you're just going to put yourself out there. You're going to really try and just go for it when you're recording. Just going to try and put it all out there and rely on editing as little as possible. Do not use editing as a crutch. And the big first part of that is recording nonstop. So this means basically putting out your podcast. It means recording, and it means when you make a mistake, you try your best to not have to repeat yourself, not have to go back. So you might stumble over your words. I'm sure I've done it a few times here. I've already stumbled over some things. I've had to go back and say, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant actually. In your first 10, 15, 20 episodes, you're going to make tons of mistakes like that. And if you try and edit them all out, that is going to really make your editing process a huge slog. If instead you think, you get in the mindset of, this is all self-improvement, this is all putting myself out there. If I just get out there and I say, I'm not going to edit anything that's not a major mistake. I'm not going to edit minor mistakes. I'm not going to edit even medium mistakes. I'm only going to edit major mistakes that actually are big, massive things that I said wrong, might cause confusion to the audience. I'm only going to edit stuff like that. Then suddenly you've got a bit of pressure on you. You've got this thing in your head that says, when you stumble over your words, when you make something, you say an and an ah, you say, well, actually, okay, I'm going to continue on and I'm going to improve on it. I'm going to think about those ums and those ahs. I'm going to think about those crutch words that I'm using, the things that I'm repeating over and over again, and I'm going to improve it. And this is going to massively improve your presentation skills over time thinking about it like that. This is what I mean by using editing as a crutch, because when you use editing as a crutch, you don't think about taking out those ums and ahs. You don't think about taking out those crutch words, those repetition words half as much. So your idea is to just record a 20-minute episode non-stop and really just try and do as much as you can in one take. And it's amazing how quickly this works. So when I first started doing this, and when we work with clients as well, trying to do this process, the first 5 episodes are horrendous. It's terrible. There's all sorts of mistakes, and you're editing out more than you have to, but you're trying not to edit as much as possible. But you know what? When you're in that pressure zone, you're treating it as if it's a live show. You're treating it as if you're on the radio, and you have to just keep going. You don't just stop and say, right, no, I'm going to repeat that. You don't have that luxury. You don't have that luxury to go back and say, I'm going to repeat that. You just have to keep going. And that really improves your presentation skills. So that's the first part of it, record non-stop. Now, that leads on to the process part of it. So that's the mindset. You're thinking about it as something that you're doing self-improvement on. You're self-improving the whole way. You're thinking about just trying to improving your presentation skills as opposed to your editing skills. But like I said, there's always going to be some major mistakes that you do have to correct. So you can't get it right every single time. There's going to be some things which are just a bit too confusing or just a bit too majorly wrong that you have to edit out. And that's where the process comes in. And the big part of the process for us is this that we call click editing. Now, click editing basically means creating a signal in your show when you make a mistake that's so big that you have to edit it out. So it's creating a signal in your show that means that you can spot these mistakes when you go through in post-production. And a big benefit of this is that you don't have to listen to your whole show. So there's so many podcasters out there, and I'm sure there's a few in the audience who still listen through their whole show when they do an edit. You listen through every single minute of your show. If you've got a half-hour show and you're doing edits, that means a half-hour show takes at least 30 minutes, if not twice that to edit. It's going to be more like 2 or 3 times to edit it if you're listening through the whole thing and having to go back and edit little things. Whereas with the self-improvement mindset, all you're doing is you're going to create a signal when it's a really big mistake. So you're not going to listen through and hear all these ums and ahs, although I encourage you to listen through quite a few of your shows so that you can sort of get tips around what you're doing. You can spot things that you're doing wrong to improve. But really, those big mistakes, you're going to catch them by the click editing. This is how it works. When you're speaking, you're presenting your show, what you're doing is something like this. So, hey folks, and welcome to the Podcraft podcast. This is the show all about podcasting, from equipment tips and okay, so intro, completely messed that up. I'm going to go back and I'm going to re-record that. So what I do is I make a signal, click into my microphone 3 times. And when you make that click 3 times, it creates a signal on the recording timeline, just like this. Oh, I'm going to get rid of that. My drawing's been there the whole time, isn't it? So it looks just like this. So you can see there's a bit of silence. Then you've got the 3 clicks that show up there. So that's them on a stereo track, shows up on each side of the stereo track. You've got these 3 bars. Now let me get up the display more prominently. If I make it that, transfer to here, so I can show you the full size. So these clicks, 3 clicks, and you can see them really clearly. Now what this does is that when I'm recording a show, so when I'm recording Podcraft, 20-minute long show maybe, I can scroll through a 20-minute show in about 2 or 3 minutes, and I can spot these. And all I do when I spot one of these is that after the clicks, what I try and do is I start speaking and I try and repeat the first few words that I said in the sentence before I made the mistake. Now, it's surprising once you've got this in your head, once you've got this mindset, how easy this is. So you'll be talking, you'll make your mistake, but you'll tend to remember the last 20 seconds of what you've said, and you can repeat the start of the same sentence and continue on without the mistake, of course. So what I do is I tend to play from here. I'll play straight as soon as I spot one of these 3 clicks. I'll play after the click. I'll play from here. And I'll listen to the correct bit, the bit that's not got a mistake in it, the repeated bit. I'll hear that. So that gives me a signal. This is what I'm looking for. I'll go back and then I'll play 10 to 15 seconds back and I'll listen for that sentence. So that start again. And it tends to repeat because, like I said, I can tend to remember what I said at the start of the last sentence. And all I do then is make a cut. So I'll pop into the bit of silence just before that sentence. I'll cut it there. I'll drag and I'll drop right through to about here, and I'll just hit delete. And within a minute maximum, you've cut out that entire mistake. And then you can just have a wee listen back through that cut, make sure it's okay. You can do the zero crossing on Audacity, for example. If you want to tip on that, obviously I'll come back to that. That's in our course. But you can do the fine zero crossing, and that lets you really make sure you're capturing that silence, so you're not getting any clicks. You're making that edit really good. I've just spotted in the top corner there, Carol asking about what program, which is a good point. This is Audacity that we're talking about. So I tend to recommend Audacity, certainly for beginner people. We edit in Audition, I'll be honest. We use Audition for a lot of our editing, but it's a paid program, mainly for workflow. It's a bit better for workflow, but Audacity is a really good editing program, entirely free. And this is what the screenshot's from. This is in Audacity. But that's how it works. Like really easily, you can cut out a mistake in less than a minute. So the way it works for me tends to be in Podcraft, for example. I will say a 20-minute show. I'll make 4 or 5 mistakes of this sort. I'll scroll through Podcraft. It'll take me maybe a minute to edit each one maximum. So I can edit an entire show of Podcraft in less than 5 minutes. So it's cutting it down from, the time of the show times 2 or 3 down to a fraction of the length of the show. So this is what I've been talking about. If you've come into this webinar through social media and you've seen me talking about editing a half-hour show in 40 minutes, I can record a show in 30 minutes and then I can edit it in 10 using this process. And especially when you go on to the post-production processes that I'll come on to in a minute. So let me get back to the normal slides. We'll go into it. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions about that click editing at the end of the show when we get to the end of the webinar, when we get to the Q&A as well. Now, the next part of it, obviously, is the editing. So this is where we get into the post-production. And I'm going to run through this. This is about keeping the post-production process as simple as possible while still achieving the quality that you need to make sure your podcast is, it's perceived as professional. But it's surprising how simple you can make your post-production process while still keeping it decent quality. And we'll go through that now. So I've written about this before. I call it the minimum effective editing process. So the me production process. Now, what does that mean? So you can go back, you can read this anywhere, thepodcasthost.com, obviously our website, thepodcasthost.com/MEE, and you can see the articles on this. So if you want to dive in afterwards and really see much more how-to on how to do this, that's just an article on our blog and the website that you can go and find. And you'll be able to see that in the replay, obviously. So if you want to go back and check that, or if you want to check that that link, I'm sure Matthew can write that link into the comments just now so that you can copy it down simply as well. This is what it looks like. So the minimum effective editing process starts with simplest thing, top and tail. So when you record your file, you're recording your edit, your show, you bring that into Audacity, you cut off the silence at the start and the end. That's all top and tail means. You're just cutting it off so that the audio file starts just before you start speaking and it finishes just after you stop speaking. So all that's in that show is your speech. There's none of this stuff before and after, which tends to be, you hit record, some bumbling about, there's, all sorts of stuff that happens before you actually speaking. So you take it off, top and tail. Then leveling. This is important because you can fiddle about. It can be a skill that you can manage to get your equipment well leveled, but more likely than not, you won't be perfectly leveled. Level basically means volume, essentially, when you get down to it. It basically means making sure that your show is going to go out onto the airwaves at a reasonable volume so that if somebody just hits play on their phone, it's in their earphones, it'll be at a decent average volume that's not going to deafen them. They're not going to have to turn it up straight away. It means that if they're listening through a playlist of podcasts, it goes from another good quality podcast to your show, you'll be around the same volume as them. So they're not going to have to flick the volume up and down. And the same with going on to the next show, it'll be around the average volume. And what you want to do here is -2 decibel peak amplitude. So in Audacity, this is easy. You select your entire timeline, you go up to the editing tools, you go down to amplify, and you basically set the peak amplitude to be -2 decibels and then hit OK. And it does it. It sets it to -2 decibels. Now, this isn't perfect. by any means, because it means that anytime you've been particularly quiet, then that's still going to be quite quiet. Anytime you've been really loud, then that is going to be set to the -2 decibels. So it's not perfect, but in most cases, this is going to give you, it's an 80-20 rule again, this is going to give you 80% of the results for 20% of the effort. So this is a great first stop. This is a good way to get a good level of quality. And then you hit publish. That's it. So we're not talking any editing. We're not talking taking out mistakes. We're not talking about putting in music. We're not talking about any of that stuff. We're not talking about anything else. That is literally all you can do as a minimum effective editing publishing process. And honestly, that is perfect for your first 10 episodes. That is what's going to get you in the groove of getting stuff out regularly. It's what's going to let you concentrate on improving your presentation skills, improving your content design skills, creating content that people actually want to hear, putting it out there in a way that engages them and draws them in and makes them want to listen to the next episode. That's what you should be concentrating on. It's not the spending time on editing and processing. It's not spending time on equipment. It's spending time on the content. So if you have simple equipment, you have a simple editing process like that, then that's perfect. And I've seen many a good show put out their show on that kind of process, forget about music, forget about heavy editing, and that gets them into the groove, which then lets them up their editing process in future so that they can increase their quality gradually, but they're off in a good foot. So I'll give you me plus though. So minimum effective editing plus, because this is after 10 episodes. And I'm sure there's plenty of people on this webinar who have already been podcasting a while, and they want to know what a more established podcaster's workflow might look like. And this is a workflow that I would recommend anyone goes through to keep yourself efficient, to keep yourself tireless long term. So this is you 50 episodes in, 100 episodes in, you might be doing all sorts of stuff to your podcast. And I would argue that this is all you should be doing to keep it down to a minimum that keeps you up to a professional level of quality. So first of all is compression. Now I talked about how leveling is not perfect. Leveling is not perfect because it means that the quiet bits are still quite quiet, and it's really just leveling it to the loudest part of the audio file. Compression gets around that. Now compression, in simple terms, essentially tries to make your whole audio file around the same volume. So it basically makes the louder bits quieter and matches them up with the average quiet parts of your show. So it's why it's called compression, because it compresses the loud parts down to around the same volume as the quiet parts, and then it amplifies it up to a peak amplitude, like I said, -2 decibels. So it brings it all into a closer, a tighter volume band, so that you don't have this, I'm going really quiet, then I'm going really loud. Now, compression is dangerous, can be really overused. You can, if something's really heavily compressed, it sounds like that kind of terrible local radio DJ where everything is really kind of, it's hard to describe unless you hear it. You know it when you hear it, because it just makes it totally undynamic. Like sometimes you want a quiet part to be a bit quieter because you want to start speaking with a bit of emotion. You want to draw people in so they are half straining to hear. So you don't want to make the quiet bits as loud as every single other bit. So you still want a little bit of dynamic volume range in there. So that's why compression can be overused a little bit. But a little bit of compression can really help, because it means that, when you've laughed really loudly or kind of shouted because you're getting enthusiastic, it means that that's not really overpowering the really quiet parts. Now with compression, it is definitely a kind of suck it and see. It's definitely not every, I can't give you settings that will suit everyone, but I can give you a few tips. The first thing you really go into is thinking about the ratio. So the ratio is the power, essentially, and just about any compression tool. Audacity, for example, it has a compression ratio. We tend to work between somewhere 2 to 3, sometimes up to 4. And that is really kind of the power of your compression. So it's how hard you're going to compress. And you don't want to bring it up to 6 or 7 or 8, for example. So try that at around the 2 to 3 to 4 range to start with. Then you've got a noise floor setting. So this is around, maybe a threshold, it'll be called in some tools. And this is around when you want to start to compress. And this is because one of the dangers of compression is that if you've got background noise, compression can bring up the volume of the background noise because, like I said, it's making the louder stuff quieter and it's bringing the quieter stuff up a little bit, so it's louder. So if you've got background noise, it can make that louder, and that's not necessarily what you want. So the threshold makes sure that you say, right, everything below, say, minus 20 decibels, I'll count that as background noise, so don't bring that up, don't make that louder. And you're just going to talk about, you're just going to encourage the software to really work with the stuff which is your speech. So play around with the threshold as well until you get a threshold that suits your recording environment, your voice, your, the way that your voice really alters in volume. So the other two main ones that you want to be playing with, there's a couple of other settings on Audacity as well. You can play around with them a little bit, but you're going to be really messing with threshold and ratio, the main things. What you're going to do is just record a show. Take a section which is maybe a 5 to 10 second section, which is, there's a little bit of dynamic range in it. You can see a loud bit and a quiet bit, and really just play around with that. Play around with the settings. Use the preview to hear what it sounds like until you get something you like, and then just write down those settings. Go with those tips I'm talking about, like try a 3 ratio with a threshold of maybe minus 20 decibels. See how that works for you. Work up and down on both of them until you get something that works for you, and then write that down and just stick to it. And if you're recording in the same environment every week, then it should make it really easy to do your compression because you can save those settings and just repeat them. But that's compression. That can be the next level. It really helps your quality if you can get it down pat and not overuse it. The next one's music. So most people want to bring in music at some point. So yeah, you're going to start editing in music. Now, it's quite easy to bring in music in a way that makes it efficient. So if you have a little bit of background music that is going to be over your intro, then by all means you can have a file set up that has your intro and your outro music in it. Say with Audacity, you've got an editing session set up. Intro and outro music are always in there. They're always faded out at the end of the intro music, faded in at the start of the outro music. So it's all set up. You've got your settings there, and all you have to do is pull in your recording and then start to mesh it in. So music can be made relatively efficient if you want to bring it in. And by all means, I would encourage you, once you're a bit more established, when you're 10, 15 episodes in, by all means, start working with music. One warning I'd have is that a lot of people go for really heavy intro music, maybe with a voiceover created by somebody else. It can be quite off-putting for some people to hear a different voice at the start. Quite often it's good to do it as the host, or maybe make it a bit more subtle, a bit more personal, a bit more transparent. That's the power of podcasting. You can put yourself out there, your personality out there. So if you can be quite honest and transparent and just you in your intro, that can really draw people in, as opposed to a kind of generic intro music, outro music that has a different voiceover on it. And by all means, they can work as well. They can work really well. But I'm just saying there are other options. A lot of people think that that's the default to go for a pre-made intro, outro. But play with just using a nice bed music, doing your own intro over the top of it, maybe doing something different every single week, having the 1 or 2 touch points you want to put through, the calls to action every single week, but, alter it so that you're really giving people the engagement straight away. Because that's the thing, if you put in a 30-second intro, that's 30 seconds people have got to suffer through every single week before they know why they need to be listening to the show. And not everybody will do that. You want to be putting the hook in early. You want to put a hook in. This is why you need to listen to the show. This is the problem I'm solving on this show. You want to put that in as early as humanly possible. And if you're doing a 30-second to a minute intro every single time, then you're not doing that. So maybe just a bed with you giving the the hook, your little intro, and then straight into the content. So, excuse me, missed a slide there. And the last one is a bit of noise reduction. So Audacity has a good noise reduction tool. It's not perfect in all cases. You have to play around with it. You have to play around with the strength. But what you do is you simply leave a bit of silence in your recording. You bring up the Audacity or whatever tool you're using. You bring up whatever tools you're using's noise reduction tool. You sample a bit of that silence. It takes a sample of that silence and it kind of creates a noise profile of the background noise. And then the tool can remove that background noise, those bits of background noise to an extent. So the problem with noise reduction is similar to compression it can be very much overused. You've all heard that recording that it sounds like the person's underwater. It sounds like, they're swimming around in a scuba suit or something, because they've taken out so much background noise that it's really affected the voice as well. So with background noise removal, you're really playing with a lot of the settings. On Audacity, the big one you're playing with really is the power. The other settings on Audacity, by all means, play around with them in the same way as compression. Pick a bit that has a bit of background noise in, use the preview function, highlight 10 seconds, preview it on that, and really play around with the settings until you find something that suits your recording environment. In Audacity, certainly the decibel power of the noise reduction is the one you're playing with at first, because that's the one that's going to say how much of this silence, this background noise profile, do you want me to remove. Start it low and start to scale it up until you start to get rid of a bit of the background noise, but it's not affecting your voice. Keep going until it really starts to affect your voice, and then draw it back a little bit. And if you use it well, it can get rid of some of that background noise, can get rid of some of that hiss, that noise floor, without affecting the voice too much. So it's worth playing with. The key thing here, though, is with background noise, you want to be improving the environment. You want to be improving your equipment rather than doing it in post-production. So you want to rely on this as little as possible and rely on your equipment and your recording environment as much as possible. And by that, I mean high quality equipment. So that Shure MV5, for example, top quality USB mic, you won't get much background noise in that at all, certainly introduced by the equipment. But some cheap recording equipment, you can get a fair bit of noise floor, a fair bit of background noise introduced just by that microphone. So that's what I mean by making sure you're doing quality equipment that really helps you with the editing process long run. Okay, and that is the end of the 3 main sections. Now, I want to quickly mention seasons, because this is something I talk about a lot. I won't go into it much at all right now, but seasons are something that I think really help you in making a sustainable show as well. So they really help you become tireless. I'm going to do a different webinar about this. I'm going to do a whole webinar about using seasons and why it's so important, how you do it, all of the benefits. But we also have a series of articles about it if you want to go and read about it. It's about content stacking and how that ties into the seasons approach as well. So you can go to thepodcasthost.com/stack, and you can see that full series of articles that will take you into seasons. But I couldn't talk about being a tireless podcaster, about being a long-term podcaster, really getting as much as you can out of your content without mentioning seasons at least. So even though I can't go into it, I would encourage you to go and check that out. And once you spot the seasons webinar that I'll put out to everyone once it's ready, then come along and join me on that, and I can tell you, gush to you about how much I love using seasons and why as well, because of the benefits that you get from it. Okay, so I've pointed you towards a fair few other resources along the way here, a few free ones. By all means, go and check out everything about equipment on our website. So that podhost.me/kit. You'll get tons of editing tips, tons of mindset tips as well, planning tips relating to all of this on our website. So by all means, go to thepodcasthost.com and start browsing through there, go through the categories and start looking at it. But I will mention our courses as well. I want to just go through this just quickly for you too. Now, if you want a lot more detail on the post-production, this is the one that people ask about all the time. Matthew, who's in the chat, our audio production expert, he's an audio drama guy by background, so he's working with ridiculous audio files. Like, I've looked at some of the stuff over his shoulder, and he's got like 20 multi-tracks, 20 tracks in his multi-track with effects and sound effects and voices, and like 8 different actors at any one time. This guy knows editing, and he put together our Audacity podcast production course, which basically covers Audacity, how to be an expert in editing your show in Audacity start to finish. So it's designed to take beginners from start to that Me Plus level. So it'll take you through how to use compression, how to use noise reduction, how to do all the other things, leveling, everything I've talked about. It'll take you through all of that from start to finish and show you how to do it with text to summarize it all, with videos to take you through it step by step. And Matthew's covered the whole lot. And we're committed to making this thing as comprehensive as humanly possible as well. So if you get in there, if you join us in that course, you buy it, and you find there's a couple of things missing that you wanted to know, then let us know, and we're committed to adding videos to that as much as we can to make it as comprehensive as possible. Like I said, editing, I think you need to keep as minimal as possible. But once you're established, or even if you just want that quick start to get to that me or that me plus level, I think this will help you. It'll get you along the way. You can do it without it. By all means, I'll be honest, you can do it without the course, but it will help you a lot of the way towards it. So by all means, let us know if you want some more information about that, or you can pop over and buy that directly, and I'll stick up. I think actually, yeah, Matthew's put the offer up there. So the button should be in the sidebar if you want to go over and check out that course right now. And of course, we've put together an offer for people on the webinar. If you're on the webinar just now, we've got a code for you. So if you do go over and buy that course just now, then if you type in WIN20 to the shopping cart when you buy it, that'll take 20% off. So that'll cut out 20% of the cost for you, for everybody on the webinar. And I'll be taking that what do you call it, promotion code. I'll be taking that promotion code off in a week's time. So the replay will be available for a week, and we're taking that promotion code off at that point. So if you do want to join us with that discount, then get joined in. And I'll mention the podcast liberation course as well, because that is our launch course. And I'm sure I've heard a few people say they were joining me on this webinar because they're looking to launch a show. You're not quite launched yet. Podcast liberation takes you through planning a show. It takes you through creating a show that is most likely to be successful. So thinking about your avatar, thinking about your plan, thinking about your aims, how to achieve those aims. Then it takes you through equipment setup. So you get quite a lot of the equipment stuff that I've talked about here, how to set it up, how to use it, how to use Skype to record a show, that type of stuff. So the logistics of recording a show as well. And then through to editing as well. So we've got some editing videos in there. We've got the sort of starter editing stuff in Podcast Liberation, really partnering with Audacity. So if you want the next level, you go into the Audacity course as well. And then finally, of course, the third part of that is the promotion. So it takes you through how to get into iTunes, all the other directories that you need to worry about, which ones to worry about, how to get in there. Talks to you about artwork, how to get great artwork, what you need to think about in your artwork, what you need to think about in your title music. If you want to get music in there early, or you want to get onto the music after 10, 15 episodes, how to get that made, where to find it for free, or to where to pay for good quality stuff. And then on to how to launch it. So a launch plan. We give you a launch plan that basically takes you through your first 8 to 12 weeks. So how to get your first, 500, 1,000 listeners. And we've got a launch plan that we've put together for you. So if you want to join in with that, that'd be great as well. And again, that's got the discount on it too. So that's got 20% off for everyone that's looking at this webinar right now as well. So yeah, if you're established, you want to get better at editing, or if you're a beginner at editing, join us on Audacity Podcast Production. If you want to launch, you get the full view of the launch process, and it's Podcast Liberation. And you can see them both there. So I think Matthew's put up links to those courses in particular in the sidebar, but they'll probably have, they'll stay there for just now. You can always get back to them with the offers tab. But if you want to come back afterwards, go to podhost.me/learn, and you'll see our catalog there. Well, I haven't mentioned Peerless Podcast websites. This is our free course, which basically just takes you how to create a website. So if you want to create a home for your podcast, a self-hosted WordPress website, then by all means go and sign up for that. I'll give you a taste of our courses. It'll just tell you how to create that website, basically. So it's a wee starter one there that you can do. Okay, right. That's enough of that. Let's get on to the questions. I want to talk to you guys. I want to see what's come up during the show. So as always, it's run over a little bit, but I'm going to stick around as long as you guys want to and answer your questions. So I hope you've got a lot of value out of that. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've taken a lot from that and how to become more of a tireless podcaster. And now let's get into the questions. So Matthew, what's the first question, do you think? Let's see. So I'm going to look through. I think what we'll do is, Matthew, if you can highlight the questions that you want to go back through, they'll pop up at the bottom of the screen, and then we can start asking them, answering them even. So I'm just scrolling back through at the same time. Patricia, thanks very much. Says, great show, how to grow your audience. That's excellent. Really appreciate that. Carol, I'll answer your question while we're waiting for Matthew just to go back through and find a few questions for us. You say, do you ever do live streaming, which is in Facebook and YouTube? Yes. So live streaming is something that I'm experimenting with a lot right now, and it's something I want to do a lot more of in future. Facebook in particular, but YouTube Live as well. I think it ties into podcasting in a big way. If you go and look at that content stacking article, so thepodcasthost.com/stacking, and you'll find that content stacking article. And that really delves into how I think that podcasting ties into your other content. And video is a big part of it for me. So podcasting for me is the top of the engagement pyramid. The podcast is where you want to get people to, but it's not the wide part of the funnel. It's not how you're going to get people in the first place in an easy way. Most people will find you, or you've got the biggest potential to be found through blogging and through video. Blogging is the biggest part of the funnel because most people search. I mean, Google is the biggest search engine out there, and that's text. So you're going to be found through your blog. You've got the biggest potential to be found through your blog. Video's next. Video, YouTube is one of the biggest search engines out there as well. So people can find you that way in a big way. So you really want to be doing video too. And in podcasting, people can find you via your podcast. They can find you on iTunes, through Stitcher, through the directories. But the potential for that is a lot smaller because there's a lot less people searching in that way. So the biggest potential to grow your audience is by attracting people in through your other content, through your blog and your video, and directing them towards your podcast, because you'll attract them in through the blog and the video, but they're not as engaging, they're not as powerful, they're not as good a way to get people to get to know you, to build trust, to spend so much time with you. Like, people spend so much time listening to podcasts. So that's why you want to guide them towards the podcast, because that's where you really draw them as a fan. So Facebook live broadcasting is a big part of that for me, because I want to start recording my podcasts in a live way. I want to record Podcraft at the same time as broadcasting it live, because that lets me record a video that I can then republish in sections, put on YouTube, repurpose it. It lets me record that podcast, of course. It also lets me be live. It lets me get a bit of interaction, put out that live, engage with the live audience as well. And you've got to be careful about it, because a live show can make for a bad pre-recorded show, because if you end up speaking to the audience the whole time, that's not interesting to any of the people that are listening to the recording. So you've got to be careful about it, but I'm definitely thinking about how to tie it in. And I think that short, sharp lives can be a really good way to engage your pre-recorded audience. So doing like a 5-minute live, which answers a really big problem in your audience, can be a great way to, engage those people that listen to your podcast elsewhere. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't figured it out by any means. It's not something I'm expert in by any means yet, but it's something I'm going to play with a lot more in future. Right, let me scroll back through. I saw Matthew put in a couple of things. So Matthew's actually answering some questions in the chat, which is excellent. I do a quick one. So David Purnell is posting. I do post on a lot of Skype interviews. Always talking about audio hijack. So yeah, it's different ways to post to put together your content. Sorry. Let me see if we've got any particular questions here. Now, I realize now that I didn't mention how to actually write a question at the very start. So if you have any more questions, pop them into the chat right now, and I'll answer as many as I possibly can. I'm just looking back through to see if there's any just now. Okay, so Matthew's saying, Joseph also asked about click editing during interviews. Yes, okay, so that's a good question. I've had that recently too. So can you do click editing in interviews? Now, I think this is another mindset thing. It's how you think about interviews. A lot of people make the mistake when they're doing an interview show in thinking that they're no longer in control. They give up control of their show when they do an interview because they think, right, I'm going to ask somebody else questions and they're going to provide the content. That is a big mistake. That is a mindset mistake. You need to get in the mindset that you own your show. Your show is yours and you have full control over it, and you should take control over it. So that starts with the prep. And what I would do is always, before you start the interview, make sure that you tell people that this isn't going to just be a straight through conversation. You're going to be controlling this. You're going to be, you may interrupt them at certain points. You may stop them speaking at certain points. You may try and go back to certain points. You may click edit. So this is the point I'm getting to. You want to prep them to let them know that sometimes you will want to cover something again, or you think that you'd like to cover a certain point. And again, this is with a mindset of not doing this or only doing it when it's really necessary. But with interviews, I feel like often it's more necessary, because like I said, you're giving over control a little bit. interviewees can be terrible. Interviewees can ramble on. They can go off topic. They can completely not answer your question. And what I'm saying is that if you warn your interviewee beforehand that you do edit your interviews, and at some point I may ask you to stop, and I may do a signal. I may go on my show, and that is a signal to me that we're going to edit that point. I may do that, and it's not in any way an insult to you as an interviewee. It is because I want to get the most out of you. I want to put you forward in the best possible way. And sometimes I might spot something that I think we can do even better, give even more value to our audience. And so don't take offense. We'll go back, we'll try and do it again. I think if you prep your interviewees in that way, you get a much better show, not just because you can do the click editing, but because they suddenly get in that mindset, that self-improvement mindset I was talking about. You tell them that, you try and keep answers to 2 or 3 minutes. You try and keep them short. You don't edit. You worry about the quality. You're not going to go off and ramble. Suddenly they won't do it. So take control of your show, prep your interviewees, and tell them you might do a click edit. And don't be afraid if you think they've gone off in one to say to them, right, let's stop that. I think we could do that one better. Let's go back. I'll do a triple clicks and we'll repeat that question. We'll repeat that segment. Okay, let's go back again. So any other questions? Any other questions? Put in any questions you have into the chat box. Matthew, if you've got any that you spotted along the way that haven't been answered yet, then certainly put them into the show. So you're saying we were chatting about bit rates earlier. Was that a question for me, or was that you answering somebody else? Let me know on that one as well. And Roger is asking, did I hear you correctly? Does the Zoom H4n have a USB connection directly into the computer? Yes. So just to clarify that, maybe that's something that's worth going over again. The Zoom H4n, the Zoom H1, the Zoom H5, the Zoom H2n, the full Zoom range basically can be used as USB mics. Of course, the advantage there is that it means that you can get around buying an expensive USB mic. So instead of buying that ATR 2100, instead of buying that Shure MV5, you just buy a Zoom H2, say, which is a really good mic on its own. And you use that as your podcasting mic. You can put it on a mount like this and actually use that as your podcasting microphone, plug it into your computer and record directly through that. But you have the flexibility to take that off the mount and take it out with you and start getting mobile interviews. If you upgrade to the H4n, the H5, the H6, which is a great device, you can suddenly plug external mics into it. And that means that you can get really good quality external interviews. I mean, if you have, say, an H5, this is what we use for our really professional, like when we want really pro quality, what we have is our H5, our Zoom H5, which is over there. I can't show you it. Here it is here. Our Zoom H5. And we plug that into 2 Shure SM58 mics, which are some of the best in the business for out and about, just robust, flexible mics. 2 Shure SM58 mics in the XLR into a Zoom H5, and that is how we record on location stuff. You'll have you holding the recorder in one hand, your own mic in the other, and the interviewee has their mic in the other hand. So you can both record in a really loud, you can record in a really bustling environment in a conference, at an event, whatever, and you still get a really good separation between you and the background noise because the Shure is really good at sound rejection. The other way, of course, is lav mics. And we do a lot of interviews in that way as well. Let me go back through my slides, just remind you about lav mics. So we will have our Zoom H5, and on the bottom of a Zoom H5, you can plug in ATR 3350s. We use ATR 3350s a lot. You can plug 2 ATR 3350s into the bottom of your H5 and then just sit down and have a conversation. The advantage there is that you're not relying on your interviewee to worry about their mic technique. So with an SM58, with a mic like this, you're worrying about them always having it in the same place. They can start to drop the mic off and, audio quality drops off a little bit, or they can go too close and they can mess it up. But with lav mics, they've got it clipped on their shirt and you don't have to worry about it. So as long as they don't brush it or anything like that, your quality is consistent. They are less intimidated. If it's somebody that's not spoken into the mic much in the past, they're less intimidated by those lav mics because they forget about them. It's just you having a chat with somebody. So that's another option there. But yeah, that's a great option for you when it comes to recording kit. So Jill asks a question there. If you're just starting out and feeling overwhelmed, where would you start? The technology intimidates me. I want to do interviews. So I suppose this is one of the key things that I'm hoping that this approach overcomes. And I hope I've given you a picture of at least during this, that I think that recording technique, presentation skills, your knowledge, your experience is 100 times more important than the equipment, than your editing skills, than the technology in any way. So what I'm trying to get across is keeping things as simple as humanly possible, keeping the technology as simple as humanly possible. So the focus is put on your experience, your knowledge, the way that you put together the content, the way you deliver that content, because that is what's going to grab people. That is what they want. If you keep the focus on yourself, and you make sure you do that for the first 20 episodes, then you are going to improve leaps and bounds as a presenter, as a content designer, in how to create brilliant content that draws people in and makes them love you, makes them want to listen to the next episode. That is the key thing. And the way to do that, Jill, I think, is by following some of the kit that I talked about here. So the simplest possible approach is getting a mic like that. So the Shure MV5, if technology intimidates you, then commit to the fact that all you're going to do to record your podcast is going to be a good quality USB mic into your laptop, say a Mac, and that is it forever. You're not going to ever worry about things like recorders, like any of that stuff. So dive in with a decent quality USB mic, like the Shure MV5 here. Get yourself one of them, a mic like that, or a Blue Yeti, or a Rode podcaster, and just say, I'm going to plug that into my computer, and that is the only technology I need, and that just works every time. That is the foolproof, high quality solution. Plug that in, then get hold of Audacity. So Audacity looks a bit intimidating at first, but actually is really simple. When you look at that interface that I had in my slides here, through to that, all you have here. Let me pop over to the full view on that. All we have here is, in its simplest possible way, you've got a record button in the top right here. 1 minute, where's my draw tool? Here it is. You've got a record button in the top right here. You just open up Audacity, you hit that record button, you start speaking. If your USB mic's plugged in, it'll be almost certainly the first mic, it'll be the default mic. If not, all you do is hit this little drop down right here, and you can choose your USB mic, and then when you hit record, it will record using that really good quality mic. And then when you're finished, you hit stop. And if you stick to that, like I say, that self-improvement mindset, that imperfection mindset, you're just going to put yourself out there in an honest and a transparent way. You don't have to do editing. You don't have to bring in music. All you're doing is putting across you, your experience, the quality of your content. And that's all you need. And that takes away so much of the intimidation, because you're not worrying then about equipment. You're not worrying about editing. You're just putting yourself out there. And you'll find that once you have the listeners, once you do that, you get better so quick, because you can do it so easily, that once you have the listeners, they'll encourage you to start learning maybe a bit more about editing. So then you start to bring in the music, then you start worrying about the compression and stuff like that I talked about. Now, by all means, Jill, I'll say it again, our Audacity course will take you through this step by step in the simplest possible way. It'll tell you how to plug in a USB mic. It'll tell you how to then do the editing, set up the USB mic. I know if you're going to make it simple as possible, you won't need a lot of that course in the early days. Certainly, there'll be a lot of that course that you don't read right now. But when you get a lot of listeners, it might be that you want to start to think about improving your quality, or even taking on somebody that you know can edit your podcast for you, and they might want to use the course as well. So by all means, it could be more useful in future for you. But I hope that answers your question there. If it doesn't, if you get any follow-ons, please do put it in there. Now, I'm popping back through to see if I can see any from Matthew that are just highlighting any questions, but if not, I'll just do some of the more recent ones. So what have we got next? I saw one there. Joseph says, he got cut off before, but do you have any recommendations on how to do an interview in a noisy place? So Joseph, yeah, I mentioned that already about having a digital recorder and SM58s. So what you're looking for in a noisy place is a reasonably directional mic, in fact, as directional as you can, and something that is really good at rejecting background noise. I can't recommend the Shure SM58s more for that. You're probably not going to want lav mics for that, because lav mics are very omnidirectional. They're not always, but most of the time, they pick up a lot of background noise. They're designed to be 6 inches away from your mouth, so they pick up a lot of the surrounding noise. So you don't want that so much. But if you get yourself a couple of SM58s and plug them into a recorder, then you can get yourself great quality recordings in really noisy places and cut out a lot of that background noise. So I hope that helped you. Again, it was the SM58s into an H4n would be the cheapest, but an H5 will probably get you better quality. They tend to have the better preamps. That tends to be the upgrade. Patricia says, thanks. I'm really glad you enjoyed it, Patricia. Thanks for coming in. Got to run. I just see that Matthew answered your question, Joseph, but I hope that made it. So Joseph asks, difference between the H2n and the H4n as well. Yep, Matthew said already, XLR mics into the H4n, so you can use much more pro kit with the H4n, and again, better preamps. The H2n actually has, for me, an advantage in that it's got a better internal mic. So if you're likely to be using it with no external mics, so if you're just going to be using the recorder on its own, like literally just speaking it into it like this, then, or as a USB mic, then the H2n does have an edge there. I think the H2n's got a better internal mic, so sometimes you might want to stick with that. So what have we got next? What else have we got? David and Matthew seem to be having a good conversation about more advanced editing and gear as well here, so that's great. Hope people are picking up some tips there. Leyland, thank you very much for the comment there. That's really glad you enjoyed it. So that's brilliant. Really glad you enjoyed it. If you want any follow-up, of course, anyone that wants to follow up on this webinar, by all means, they can always contact us. I'll go back to the contact page. I should have that on as a slide. You can get in touch via the website at any point. info@thepodcasthost.com is our direct email address. Tweet us at thepodcasthost. But I'm happy to take a couple more questions. What are we on to now? We're on to 6:10, so that's just been over an hour now, but I'm happy to take a few more questions if you think it'll be useful. I did spot another question just a second ago. Now, where was it? If you do use lavs, any risk of the other person's mic? Yeah, definitely. Lav mics are omnidirectional, like I say, so they can pick up a lot of background noise. But yeah, Matthew comments there, it'll be synced in the final mix. So yeah, I mean, if you've got two people speaking together on lav mics into a recorder, then that kit is so designed for that, so low latency that there won't be any, there's no latency, there's no time shifting there. So it'll just be completely, what am I trying to say, at the same time. So you just won't hear the bleed. You won't hear the bleed between the microphones. So it's absolutely fine. Sigrid asked, what mic I'm using now? Good question. This is the MXL 990, which is a mic I have used for years. I love this mic. It just suits my voice. Now, the thing with microphones is that people will rave on about this microphone being the best, that microphone being the best. There's a lot of hype around the Heil PR40, for example. There's a lot of podcasting teachers, very prominent podcasters, will say the Heil PR40 is the holy grail, the mic you have to have if you want to be a top podcaster. But it's rubbish. It's nonsense, because microphones they're all so different in terms of the noise profile they keep to pick up, that a great mic for one person is not a great mic for another person. This mic, having tried a lot of mics, suits my voice really well. It suits the range of frequencies that are just in my voice. To get a great mic for you, you need to try as many mics as you can, and it's difficult. You can't try tons of mics. They're expensive. It's hard to find a shop that actually stocks a big range, so it's difficult to find a mic that really suits you. But I tried this mic once, and I just loved the sound it gave for my voice. And the big benefit is that it's 79 quid. So it's 79 pounds to buy it. I don't think it's much more dollars than that in the US, which is a fraction of the price of a Heil PR40. I think it gives a better quality than the PR40. PR40 maybe could be argued to have an advantage in terms of its dynamic. So in a bad recording environment, it'll pick up less of the background noise. But this is shockingly good at, for a condenser mic, it's shockingly good at isolating the background noise as well. So I love it. You'll see it listed in our if you go to the kit article that I've listed a couple of times, podhost.me/kit, if you go there, look at our equipment our equipment archive, you'll see a review of this mic in there, and links to it as well. So what else have we got? Right, who's still in the room? How many people have we got still here? 16 people still sticking with us after an hour and 10 minutes. I really appreciate you spending this time with us. So let's see. Any last questions? Matthew, have you spotted any questions? Pop them in into the chat. Put in a comment for me if you've seen any questions that I've not answered yet. I'm scrolling through. Joseph, yeah, Matthew's answered you there. The MXL 990 was the mic I'm talking about. Yeah, cheapest chips for the quality of mic it is. It's just so good for the price. You get a free stand with it as well. It's ridiculous. You get this this mount for it too, which goes on my my Rode stand. No worries at all, Joseph. Glad you appreciate it. Glad you liked it. Matthew's popped in a link to the review as well, so that's great. Good stuff. Okay. Right. Okay. I think if there's no more questions coming in, I think we're going to tie up there. So I'll give you 1 more minute, 60 more seconds. Pop in any questions, but I'm not seeing any more questions. Please, if you have put a question in that I haven't answered, type it in again. I apologize if I've missed it. It's always hard to keep up with the questions on the chat. But if there's anything that I've not answered, anything that Matthew's not answered, please do pop it in the chat again in the next minute and I'll answer it. Otherwise, I really appreciate you joining us. I really appreciate you spending a whole hour with us. Love getting the comments in the chat there. Really appreciate the fact that you liked it. And I hope you got a lot out of it. The replay will be here. So if you want to go back and watch it again, fast forward through, pick out the bits. If you want to follow on again, if you want to ask any repeat questions, any extra information, by all means, email and Twitter is up on the screen right now. If you do want follow-on information, if you want to buy the courses, like I say, go to podhost.me/learn, or our domain. Podhost.me is just a forward to our domain. So the podcasthost.com/learn, and you can type in the affiliate code. It's been going too long now. You can type in the coupon code WIN20. That'll get you 20% off. But again, really appreciate the time. Last question. Okay, so here's a last question from Joseph to tie us up. How does your mic plug into your computer? How does my mic? So I think you're asking particularly about this mic, aren't you? Can I show you? Okay, let me do something. We're going mobile camera. Right. MXL 990 on a Rode stand. XLR cable. XLR cable goes under the desk. Pops up over here. Where's the camera? There it is. Pops up out from underneath the desk here and into my Yamaha MG10. Now wait a minute. Let me go to my better camera view. Okay, there we go. So Yamaha MG10 is my mixer of choice. It's a great mixer. Totally, it's the best mixer I've found for balance of price and quality. Really low, like the lowest noise floor I've heard in any mixer of this kind of price range. You have to go up to the Mackeys in the £300-400 range to get the same kind of noise floor, and this is only about £120. Really, really good mixer. And I plug the MXL straight in. So the MXL is going in here. And that's my other mic. So that is a mic that normally goes on that stand. So if we have a co-host in here, you can get an insight into my webinar setup here. This desk here, I'm on this side. My co-host or interviewee will go on the other side, and we can have them on that microphone. So that's into the mixer here. Mixer outputs from here to digital recorder. So that's how we record interviews. That goes into the digital recorder. That's the H5. I tend to listen to it via this, but it goes into the computer. So that was the question you actually asked. It goes into the computer via the AUX out right here. So this is one of the keys for quite a Yeah, sorry, Joseph, Mixer Skate. Do you know what? We're putting together an equipment course right now that takes you through all of this. If you were wanting to do a mix minus setup, of which there's various advantages. And again, everyone is watching this. I've talked for this entire webinar about keeping things simple. Keep it simple. You do not need to do this. This is when you want to do all sorts of fancy things like webinars with your podcasting setup. But that goes out to the computer. So that cable basically goes out to our computer over that wall. So that is how it connects to the computer. And if you want to find out a bit more about that type of equipment and mix minus setups and things like that, then we have an equipment course coming out, and some of it is covered in some of that is covered in the podcast liberation course as well, actually, just how we set up some of our stuff. Joseph, yeah, stick with USB. Seriously, stick with USB. Certainly in the early days, you can work at, once you have, say, over 1,000 listeners. Once you have more than 1,000 listeners, that is when you can start to justify spending some more money on kit, because that's when actually the incremental improvement that you get by improving your kit will pay off. If you've got 200 listeners, 500 listeners, even 1,000 listeners, at that point, you know, improving your audio quality by a little bit each time, or improving your flexibility and being able to do mix minus interviews, that kind of stuff, doesn't pay off. It doesn't pay itself off in terms of the extra cost or the extra complexity. It only starts to pay off once you're into the thousands of listeners and your podcast can start to pay for itself, because that's when you can start to get sponsorships, sell products, justify spending a lot more time on this thing. So early days, USB, and only think about things like this once you're making a living out of it. No worries, Joseph. Thank you again for the question. Excellent. Right. I'll take that as a finish for the webinar. Thank you again for joining us. Thanks so much for coming in. Again, get in touch. The Podcast Host on Twitter, info@thepodcasthost.com, by email. Check out our courses. Please do check out our courses. Otherwise, see you on the next webinar. See you in the next blog post, the next podcast. Keep on podcasting. See you next time.